Hey everybody, welcome back to CX Summit. This session is Transforming Contact Centers with Microsoft Teams. And I've got two great guests with me, Patrick and Peter. Patrick, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Cavell?
Yeah, Patrick Watson, Senior Analyst. I've been with Cavell Group for a couple of years, focusing on the collaboration and customer experience market. So Cavell, for more than 15 years, has been present doing research both with vendors and telcos and service providers, but also we do enterprise research with thousands of businesses across their communication requirements, collaborative requirements, customer communication requirements. So hopefully not too much data to bombard you with today, Tom.
Lots of real world examples I will be asking for, so that's really good. And Peter, a little bit about you and AudioCodes.
Yep. So Peter Broeckx with AudioCodes now for the last 5-ish years, something like that. Responsible for the contact center solutions in EMEA. So from the commercial perspective, AudioCodes typically known very well in the collaboration UC space around what we do with Teams. But we've been working really close with a number of contact center vendors as well, and have been very active in that space. And I guess it's around the topic of today. We see this coming closer together again with UC and contact centers, and especially around people moving to Teams and then asking, okay, what do we do with the contact center? And that's typically the question I get day in, day out, and what I'm working on together with my local colleagues around the globe at AudioCodes.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's a great place to start. That's exactly what I'm seeing with organizations I work with as well. Traditionally, you had UC and contact center as two different buckets, but increasingly they're coming together both in terms of vendors having first-party offers that span classic UC and contact center, but also from a customer project point of view, it seems like, well, we're doing UC or we're doing Teams specifically for this session. What do we do about contact center? Patrick, is that you've got obviously eyes on research from lots of customers? Is that true across the board?
Yeah. So in our latest CCaaS research report, we spoke to all of what you consider the main contact center vendors, and one thing we heard consistently was that effectively there is this convergence going on, as you've seen with UC and contact center, and I know we'll come on to embedded communications and CPaaS and how relevant all of that is for customers in terms of integrating and aligning all those different systems to create a holistic customer experience for the end customer.
Nice. And Peter, from your point of view, is it the industry and the vendors driving this consolidation of platform, or is it customer requirements? What are you seeing?
The question of the chicken and the egg, right? What we see is a lot of customers, enterprise customers, making a, let's say, strategic decision for Teams as their collaboration platform, and then looking at their communications platforms as in general and go like, okay, we've now made this strategic choice for Teams. How do we manage all the rest? Because typically they had something like Avaya or Cisco or Mitel, etc. They're now moving away from the PBX side to Teams. And then they go like, wait, we've still got an Avaya. It's a pretty expensive platform. We're only using it for the contact center. Do we keep this or do we something different? And then the big question is, if we do something different, do we do something Teams native, if I can call it like that? Or do we go for the traditional contact center vendors? And if we do so, how do we then kind of make sure that the front office still can work with the back office? And that's that's what we see literally day in, day out. So it really complements what Patrick was saying with this research.
Yeah, and definitely I'm seeing the same thing as well. And it's interesting. I have a lot of projects where customers almost assume they're going cloud for Teams, therefore they need to go cloud for contact center. Contact center seems to be the last thing to go. Often it's more complicated, it's revenue generating, it's tied directly to customer engagement. So there's certainly some, kind of business nervousness around that change compared to UC, where we all kind of just got, thrown out to work remotely, and it all pretty much came together with all the platforms. Peter, on that kind of native versus or kind of third party, or Microsoft talk about having the connect model and the extend model. What are you seeing around that? Are you seeing more people go towards kind of tightly integrated solutions, or people connecting them via SIP? Because obviously you guys do a lot with the session border controllers and the trunking as well.
Yeah, it really depends on the end customers. So you have a lot of, let's say, larger enterprises that have decided for Teams and have relatively limited requirements when it comes to contact centers. So it's more like I need some auto attendant, I need some basic skill-based routing, some real-time dashboarding, historical data, and there they typically are inclined to go for, let's say, a Teams native solution on top of what they have with Teams. And then if you look then at AudioCodes, that's then typically what we provide with our new VOCA CIC, so Conversational Interaction Center solution, that actually provides this kind of add-on on top of Teams as a, let's call it, contact center light solution. Others that go and go like, okay, I need all the bells and whistles a contact center can provide. There, typically, you will have the large enterprises that will still keep looking at the Genesises of this world and the competition, and then go like, okay, let's go for the real contact center solution, Genesis, for example. But then there's still this question about, okay, I do want some integration between the two. So you see the two. And then obviously you do have some, let's call it, Teams native contact centers that provide all the bells and whistles like the Anywhere 365s and the Luwares in this world that do have their role to play as well. But then the question is going to be, and I'm pretty sure you'll touch on it with Azure Communication Services and what Microsoft is now doing with Dynamics. Lots is changing.
Yeah, I mean you just outlaid the many options there. So you've got completely native. You can just use Teams, call queues, and auto attendance. You've not really got any real-time reporting there, but it's free, quote unquote, as in the box, not really free, but included. You step up to those kind of overlay solutions that have a bit of extra functionality on top or are tightly integrated, and that's where that extend model comes in using the Teams APIs. And then you've got the Connect where you can just trunk between the two systems, so just voice calls. But as you say, Peter, then people are asking, well, how does chat integrate? How does video integrate? Patrick, maybe you could touch on that, and then the whole Azure Communication Services story, because it's funny, I guess, being in the analyst land, you've got three different areas there that are all coming together. CPaaS, Contact Center, and UC are now an intertwined conversation.
Yeah, and even more than that, if you think about the sort of data management and CRM platforms, and obviously Dynamics is something we'll talk about. But it was interesting what Peter was saying in terms of and what the team are doing there in terms of that sort of contact center light requirement. So when I was sort of thinking about this before we started recording, that in terms of the relevance of Teams and contact center, the two marry together quite well, because effectively what you see is the larger an organization is, the more likely it is to have adopted a collaboration platform and then in turn Teams. And again, the larger the organization is, the more likely it is to be utilizing at least some contact center capacity within the organization. So our enterprise research has 88% of organizations with more than 250 seats actually using Teams specifically. So there's this huge overlap between organizations using contact centers and organizations using Teams. And most of the RFPs that I'm sure you two are seeing, there is going to be some stipulation that any sort of contact center solution has to integrate to some level or work in conjunction with Teams, ideally as seamlessly as possible. And that's why we've seen this big rush from the industry. I thought it started quite slowly. It was a bit like direct routing. Everyone was sort of looking at it and thinking, are we going to get into this? And as Teams has captured a huge amount of the market and increased in user volume so much, there's been this huge rush. I think there's 10 on the list of certified providers at the moment, and then there's more than that on the publicly listed that are in progress.
Yeah, on the pending list.
In the pending list. So effectively, the contact center industry can't afford to ignore Teams, and I think it's an increasingly competitive market. If you take the sort of standalone customer experience market, and these providers are always looking for a way to differentiate And great compatibility or integration with Teams is now becoming one of those sort of critical differentiators that they can use. So that's why we're seeing this big move to sort of embrace Teams CC certification and Teams CC integration.
Yeah, and as you say, it really is quite a innovative and competitive space. I think the massive move to cloud for UC kind of unblocked some of the cloud conversation for contact center, because it's like, wait a minute, we're running our entire business on Teams PBX in the cloud now. Surely contact center is ready to go there as well. But also I think that there's, on the UC side of platforms, yes, you see innovation between Microsoft and Cisco and WebEx, but they're getting more and more the same. Whereas in the contact center space, I think you're seeing genuine business impacting, customer impacting innovation around things like AI and ML. And you said data, CRM. Peter, I wonder if you've got any thoughts on kind of customers and what you're seeing, and that consolidation. What are you seeing for customers there?
I think automation and AI, if it's not around Teams integration with contact centers, the second topic that we typically talk about with end customers is automation. It's typically very high on the agenda, not just for the technical teams, but also C-level and even boards. You see a lot of people going like, okay, we are now transforming our contact center. Let's do it right at once and not just look at the technology, but also, okay, how are we going to serve our customers? Is this going to be with live agents for every call or every interaction that comes in, or are we going to try and automate as much as possible? And you see a lot of the large enterprise customers go for automation full in. Look at what, for example, Vodafone is doing. They've built their own chatbot with Toby. They're integrating that with all their different channels, whether that's voice, chat, you name it. And it's just one example where you see automation coming to front. And a lot of customers are looking at automation for better customer service, to provide better service. Some are looking at it because of they've got difficulties hiring the right skilled people. So they look at actually adding virtual agents to complement, or they look at AI to help their agents better serve their customers with agent assist technology. So there's lots of stuff going on. And if you typically look at Microsoft before with their Azure communication, with their Azure bots frameworks, and now Power Virtual Agents, it's great technology that actually helps their customers serve their customers better. And we see the questions coming in from the field where they go like, okay, we want to go this route. How do we make sure that these automation platforms like Power Virtual Agent actually work well and integrate well with our contact center solutions? And there's again a field where AudioCodes plays a role with what we call Voice AI Connect, where we are the orchestration engine between the contact center platforms and, for example, Microsoft Power Virtual Agent.
Yeah, I'm certainly seeing that come up too. And then, Patrick, let's talk a little bit about Dynamics, because I feel like Microsoft are a bit of a sleeping giant. Peter talked there about their kind of automation platform. They've obviously got the classic Dynamics scenario of running the business and CRM and XRM, but that they recently threw their hat into the legitimate voice ring with their Voice Connect. How are you seeing the market react to that?
Well, it's the CRM market in itself is, again, as all of these technology markets are, incredibly competitive. And you think of Salesforce, I think their market share is 20% or slightly less than that. So you think Salesforce has a dominant market share, but actually it's only a fifth of the market. And there's this huge, and as you said, Microsoft effectively probably slightly below where you'd think it might be in this market, considering its experience in the space and data management and its capabilities within Azure. But I think that whole area in terms of CRM is going to be the sort of argument has been for a long time is, what is the front end platform that your agents work from? Is it a CCaaS platform? Is it a CC platform? Is it going to be your collaboration platform in Teams? Are you going to embed it within your CRM platform, within Salesforce? And you've seen Salesforce make acquisitions in the space. So that's particularly interesting. But I think there is this and it comes into ACS as well. There is this demand for bespoke solutions, as Peter was talking about. All of the ultimate goal of this is to improve customer service and customer experience. And there's this demand for especially larger enterprises to be able to create this really bespoke solutions to meet those customer demands. And you think of embedded communication services, or CPaaS, and the classic example that's always overused is, automated messaging for customer reminders about appointments and that sort of thing. So that's an example of how it's used. And this increasing convergence is now taking place within the market due to the demand for solutions like this. So you've got CPaaS, you've got CCaaS, and then you've got the data management, CRM, Microsoft Dynamics. So increasing throughout the technology estate, you're trying to consolidate and integrate as many systems as possible to improve the agent experience, the user experience, all of our experiences in terms of efficiency and productivity, and how that relates to the end customer in terms of the end customer experience that they're receiving. So I think it's going to play a huge role, and I'm really interested to see what Microsoft do next in the space, because I think analysts, and I wasn't the first, have been thinking for a long time Microsoft might acquire someone in the CX space.
Yeah.
So it's going to be really interesting to see what they do there.
Yeah, I think you touched on a few interesting points there. Well, one of them being kind of we've talked forever. I mean, as long as I've been in the space, about omni-channel and being data driven, but the reality of a lot of contact center projects I've been involved in is, for all that talk, they were mostly voice and they were mostly siloed, and then there would be a different team that did email and a different team that did web chat, and I feel like for the first time I'm seeing projects actually do more than lip service to say, at the very least, we want all the data in the same place. Like I think the reality of having an agent who does email, web chat, video, and voice, it isn't really reality most people I work with, because they're focused on a particular skill set. Like, so the people that are very good at talking to customers on voice might not be the fastest at running 10 web chat sessions or whatever it may be, but bringing the data together, understanding the customer journey, the fact that if they jump from WhatsApp or Twitter chat to voice, you know who they are and they have to start from scratch, that seems to be becoming really like a genuine requirement rather than nice to have.
I agree with that.
So Peter, what else from a bringing the worlds together point of view? You mentioned that earlier when you were talking. What are you seeing as like primary drivers for that?
If you look at what you were just discussing with Dynamics, this is also something you see. And then the big question, of course, is what's key for that agent that is trying to help his customer? Where does the information he needs sit? Typically, in a lot of cases, that's a CRM platform. So integration between all these different platforms, typically also CRM, that's key. I think we'll see a lot of change in the market, especially the contact center market, in the coming years because of this. As I mentioned before, automation is key. I think where the data sits and who owns the data is going to become even more relevant for this space. So it's going to be this combination of the data, the automation. Who is going to prevail? Difficult to say. There's one thing I think we can all agree upon, and that's Microsoft has got a really good play in this, right? Because they're in this dynamic space. They've got Azure with Azure Communication Services. They've got Power Virtual Agent, Azure Bot Framework. They've got all the different elements you need to provide this end-to-end solution, and I think they're very well positioned to be very relevant in this space for the next couple of years.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think you're right. It's interesting. It's almost they have all the component parts all living in slightly different business units. It's the bringing it together in the Microsoft world, as it always is. Like you can see all the pieces, write them on a bit of paper, and it's like, now bring that together for a customer is the challenge, I think.
Yeah, and that's where we sometimes, well, not sometimes, also in the past have been playing a role, right, in linking this and interrupting these things together. That's also why we kind of work really closely with Microsoft to help them fill some gaps they have or complement solutions they have to make it an end-to-end solution towards their partners and customers. To be honest, we're the constant is the only change we have, right? Or change is the only constant in our field. I think it's even more relevant these days when you say something like that. So I'm really looking forward to what the next big change is going to be in our field.
Thanks. And Patrick, I guess as we come to the end of this session, what would you point to for organisations to look for the future in this space, particularly if they're on a Teams journey and that they're thinking about contact centre and
I
customer
think just
engagement?
the point that Peter made there is particularly interesting in terms of Microsoft's capabilities, and it's the question of where the data sits. I think is important, but it's what capability, what can you do with that data? And because Microsoft has this incredible capability in terms of, and we've already mentioned AI and ML, and you can't have a contact center discussion without ticking those off the bingo card. In terms of using that data to drive intelligent outcomes and better understanding of customer behavior and how you can better serve customers, that is probably Microsoft's trump card in this space. But as you said, it's how they do that, and that could be a huge benefit to any customer that's on a Microsoft journey and thinking about Microsoft in the contact center. But just the one thing I did want to say, potentially about the future, I think we are going to see much more composable, customizable solutions, especially in large enterprises. And we've heard about this concept for a while of sort of the composable enterprise or the composable desktop, where effectively large enterprises take the most useful aspects of various solutions. So we're talking about it and as Pete was saying before, is your CRM platform most important to you? Is your collaboration platform? But I think what we're going to see more and more is piecemeal solutions, taking the most effective parts of different softwares and bringing them into their own bespoke solutions to improve efficiency. And I think that's why I sort of come back to the last question in terms of embedded communications or CCaaS functionality is going to be so important. And I just think at the moment we're on the sort of cusp. We've got all of it's as you were saying with Microsoft, Tom, they've got all of this capability. And I think we've got it out there in the industry in various different areas. It's just bringing it all together into one single pane window. And I think you'd argue that there's probably no one better placed than Microsoft to enable that.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, and I agree. I think that kind of, if you look at that citizen developer movement, I think you're seeing that move up the stack, and certainly the businesses need that level of agility. Then having that composable architecture definitely makes sense. Well, time has flown as we knew it would in this session. It's such a big topic. If I can just wrap it up, thanks both of you for taking the time. Peter, if you could just let us know where people could find you if they want to know more.
Peter Broeckx, peter.broeckx@audiocodes.com. And if you're on Teams, I'm on Teams as well.
Nice, thank you, Peter. And Patrick?
Yeah, also available on Teams. I mean, who isn't? But if you head to cavellgroup.com, our latest contact center research is out, and our latest Microsoft Teams research as well, both there, and covering a lot of the points that I touched on in much, much greater detail.
Great. Well, I really appreciate it, guys. I think that was a really interesting session. And I'm Tom Arbuthnot, and you can find me at Tom Talks blog and LinkedIn and all the socials. But thanks very much, guys, for the time, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Absolutely. It was great talking to you guys.
Thanks, Tom. Pleasure as always.